Welcome back, America. We have the perfect closer for tonight's very important conversation. He has done extraordinary work in the election integrity space for many, many years. He served as a federal election commissioner and worked inside the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division enforcing the Voting Acts Right. Joining us right now, Hans von Spakovsky with the Heritage Foundation, taking on the ranked choice voting issue we've been talking about tonight. Hans, great to have you back on the show.
John, thanks for having me.
It is great to have you. I would never have imagined when I started my reporting career 3 decades ago, we'd be having a conversation one day in America about a multiple choice, ranked choice voting. But
Right.
It seems to be the new love of the liberal movement, particularly the left. Tell us a little bit about how it has suddenly popped up and what dangers it presents to election integrity.
Well, first thing to say about ranked choice voting is it's confusing and chaotic. Even election officials have a hard time with it. Think about the average voter going in and trying to engage in it. I think folks on the progressive left are pushing it because they believe it helps more, frankly, candidates from the far left win elections because they are hoping that voters will basically split their votes between other candidates. So this isn't a way of trying to get more moderate candidates elected. It's exact opposite of that. And it has a very big problem, John. And the big problem is what's called ballot exhaustion.
Yeah.
And that leads directly to voter disenfranchisement. And that's a problem that doesn't go away no matter how long a jurisdiction has ranked choice voting in place.
Yeah, that's a great point. And particularly minority voters
Yes.
are at great risk here, which is ironic since Democrats and liberals say they've all been all about trying to empower minority voters. But this would actually have a negative effect. Describe how that works.
Well, in fact, this what makes voting harder, right, which again is quite ironic given the left is pushing this. Look, what you're supposed to do in an election is not just vote for the top candidate you want to have win. You're supposed to rank all of the candidates from your first choice all the way to your last choice. That meant that, for example, in 2021, when we had the New York mayor's race, they had ranked choice voting for the first time, and they had 10 candidates in the race. So the average voter going in was supposed to rank all 10 candidates. Because nobody got a majority of the vote, they had to go through 8 rounds of vote counting and throwing out people's ballots. So many voters in New York did not rank all the candidates, but that by the time they got to the 8th round, they had thrown out 140,000 ballots.
Wow.
Those voters' ballots did not count in the last election. And social scientists looking at this have said that anywhere from a third to half of voters don't rank all the candidates in a race. So their ballots, if they go into multiple rounds, their ballots are going to get thrown out. They're not going to be counted in the final round.
It's absolutely stunning to hear that number. I mean, it's just remarkable. And obviously, the more time something takes, the more confusing it is, the quicker the drop off all throughout this process.
Right.
And I think it's just remarkable to watch. There's also the extension of elections. We had election day. Now we have election week or weeks.
Right.
This almost seems like we might be heading to election month because you're going to have the early voting, then the ranked choice and the counting and the recounting and the recounting. That's something I think is very unpopular with Americans. This will definitely extend the back end counting, correct?
That's right. Remember, like I said, New York, it took 2 weeks just for the mayor's race. Now, think about the average ballot in a place like Georgia, for example. When you go in on election day, you're not only voting for president, members of Congress, but you're voting for statewide seats, state legislature, county commission races, city council races. You may have anywhere from 50, 60 races on the ballot. And think about the fact that rather than just picking one candidate, you are supposed to be ranking all of the candidates in every single one of those races. Not only will it take voters much longer to get through a ballot, think about the election officials having to tabulate dozens and dozens of races and going through multiple rounds in each of those races of vote counting.
Unreal. It is absolutely unreal. And we already have long lines in some polling places. Imagine what'll happen
Right.
when you're you're ranking 10 people for 60 races. You'll have riders cramp when you're done. I want to turn to two amazing tools that Heritage has created. The Heritage Foundation Election Integrity Scorecard, I think one of the most important documents created in the last few years, and also the Heritage Election Fraud Database. Two tools that give us visibility into issues that a lot of people didn't have. How important are they, and what are the trend lines you're seeing in them?
Well, the election fraud database, I think, is actually the most visited page on our
Isn't that
website.
amazing?
And it is unique. It documents proven cases of fraud from across the country. We're up to over 1,400. We have hundreds more cases we're following. We don't put cases into it until someone's been convicted in a court of law or a judge has ordered a new election.
Wow.
That database shows that fraud actually does happen. Sometimes it's an isolated case, somebody
Right.
just taking advantage of the system. Other times it actually changes election results. But people can see in every state the kind of fraud that has occurred there. The scorecard is a rating of every single state. We came up with 47 different criteria to judge how good or how bad a state's laws. Everything from how well do they maintain the accuracy of their voter list to do they require a voter ID to vote? And then we rated the states on a score of 100. The highest scores are only in the low 80s, so every state can do improvement. But then you have states like Nevada, New York, California that are at the bottom of the list. They get failing grades because their rules and regulations there are so bad.
Wow, that's just amazing. Any states that you look at and say, that's a model, I like where we're going in that state?
Well, Florida's at the top of the list. They have done very well. They've put in all kinds of reforms. Georgia's another state. I mean, just to give you a quick example, Georgia for a long time has had a good voter ID law, but it only was for in-person voting. And as you know, that there's this big trend, more and more people voting by mail. So they extended their voter ID requirement to absentee or mail-in ballots. That's something every single state ought to do.
Yeah, it's such good advice. These are two great public service tools. I refer to them often. They're amazing, Hans. Last question, as you look at ranked choice voting, you've got one of the keenest legal minds in election law. What is the likely legal challenge that might create a problem for states moving in this direction? There seems like there's a lot of unequal protection if some states have ranked choice and some don't.
Well, I think the biggest problem is the way it potentially discriminates against minority voters. You know, when New York did this in their 2021 mayor's race, the head of the local NAACP was very much against it. She said that making voting harder and more confusing was going to disenfranchise the black voters of the city. And so I think there's a potential Voting Rights Act lawsuit against ranked choice voting.
Wow, that'll be a big one to watch. What an amazing turnabout. Democrats on the flip side of a voting rights action. That'll be something historic. Hans, we love the work you and Heritage do. You truly make this country better with all the great work that you're doing on elections and election integrity. What a great honor to have you on the show tonight.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, my friend. All right, folks, on that note, and that's a great note to end, we conclude yet another successful special report with great thanks to our sponsor, Heritage Action for America. And remember, folks, you can get involved in protecting your election system as soon as today by visiting HAFA's Activism Center on their website. Here's how you get there, heritageaction.com. Once again, that's heritageaction.com. Pretty easy to remember. I also want to thank the Real America's Voice Network for allowing us to have these breakthrough conversations. We learn so much from some of the best experts in the country, and that is a blessing. And with that, I want to wish you a blessed evening. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back with regular programming with Amanda tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Real